be done.
Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this beautiful day and for the sunshine and the beauty around us. And we are thankful for our employment. And we pray, Father in heaven, as we are here today, that we will all learn and grow, and that the presenters will be able to say what they want to say and help us all do better at our jobs. We pray, Father in heaven, that we might serve the university appropriately and use thy resources in ways that would be pleasing unto thee. We thank you for thy love and care and ask for thy blessings. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Hi, my name is Doug Walker. My job, first of all, is to introduce the rest of the identity and access management team who will be making the presentation. Applause is welcome as they stand. We'll start with Belinda. She's our brave product manager. Dan Dees, he's the chief engineer on our team. Then we'll go to the most experienced member of our team, Steve Thomas. Alex Wilson. And that's the team that will be making the presentation today. They asked me to get up here and start with a little bit of history. You'll notice that the title of our presentation is Living with Identity Post-Pro, something to that effect. And they sent me up here because I am so old I can remember when Pro started. So let me give you just a brief idea. The way we have dealt with identity at BYU for the last 30 years, it's now 30 years old, is we have what we call the person reference object or the person system pro. You may have heard it in different things. Over the years it has evolved. We had the idea 30 years ago of having one central database that had all of the identity information about anybody associated with BYU. Now, of course, that was a bit ambitious, but we did get all of our students, employees, and a lot of things in there. And it has worked fairly well, I think. It's interesting to me, I was doing some reading this about 6 months ago, and Internet 2, the consortium of higher education and research institutions, has an initiative underway. In fact, they have two kind of competing ones to develop a person registry, is what they're calling it. Penn State's leading that charge. I got on and read through their stuff, and it looks just like Pro. Pretty amazing. And it's pretty cool, but it's also a little bit behind the times because we've learned a few things. One of the things that we did in Pro, and this is what we're going to be talking about today, because this is changing. We had a centralized database of that identity information, and we asked applications to regard that centralized identity as the master of identity information. And we said to you, if you need to change someone's contact information or critical identity information, you don't get to do it in your application. You have to come to the Pro application and the Pro screens, personal information screens, to make that change. We also don't let you create a new identity in your application. We ask you to come to the personal information system into Pro and create the identity there. A lot of systems over the years have taken that information and replicated it back into their systems. Virtually every application here represented in this room has to have some identity information inside of your system. And that was generally done by replicating it back. We had several different methods, all of which worked only sort of well, to get information back into people's applications. That makes sense? Any questions with that? Over the last few years, we decided that's a cool idea, but very old. What we want to introduce today is how we see the world changing, which is every application is a node of identity information on a peer level with everything else. So we're going to try and say to you, you would be allowed inside of your application to update any kind of identity information. Okay? Good. Thank you. I'll try and spice it up a little bit. You would be able to update inside of your application any identity information.
I didn't know these were
And
over
if you
here.
did certain things, you would raise notifications to the other systems, and we could share it that way. So we can say, in essence, to the PeopleSoft applications or any application, you no longer have to break your application to prevent someone from updating address information in HR or whatever. You can go ahead and do it. You don't have to break applications anymore. Yes?
So Doug, if I remember right, our rule of thumb used to be you could update your local copy if and only if you were able to put that update either directly into the centralized database or in a queue that would be eventually processed to that centralized database.
That's
So,
something.
sounds like that definition you're coming up with is very similar to what we had in the past. So we didn't tell anybody, don't update your local copy unless you couldn't do the other.
Right. That's, even it's only in the last few years, we even let them started doing that kind of thing. We're trying to say that's going to become the world as is. I have a diagram that I wanted to show, and we're not going to go into it in great level of detail. I call it the broccoli diagram. That's not it. I like it. Oh, by the way, I should bounce back one tab. I didn't bring this up. If anybody wants to, you can go out there and look and find this, and this is all the team members and contacts you can ask this information. And that's for the broccoli diagram. I'm not going to spend, because it would take way too much time doing a complete explanation of this. But what you'll notice in here is this is the feature we're doing. We call this the broccoli diagram. I actually tagged it. You can go on the wiki and search for broccoli and find it. It's one of the tags that are on your handout. You'll notice that what we're saying is we're going to come up with a new identity and access management solution, which people can use. They can go ahead and call web services to get that information. But the realization is all of these systems are going to have their own identity stores. PeopleSoft, etc. Crow will not go away, for those of you that are worried. What it is going to become is the identity store for our AIM system. And we're going to start allowing them to manage that store on their own. So if you are currently using Crow Web Services or using those screens, they're not going to go away. I will say one thing. In the future, as that becomes reality, and it really becomes the Pro Systems identity store, they may start to say, why are we keeping identities that we don't really even care about? And there may be some cleanup. In the future, this is the system that will have everyone's identity in the IAM system. So that's one of the things that you can see going forward. What is that? Why does that help us? This is the only explanation I would give. In the Pro system, when we developed it 80 years ago, we allowed applications to integrate directly with the database. Okay? So if you look inside the AIM system, it's coded to work right inside that database. It's got its fingers all through it. We used to have a lot more applications that did the same thing. Over time, they've been, say, replaced with PeopleSoft. And that makes it extremely difficult to ever do anything with that system. You have to change a database, you have to change how many gazillion lines of code. And which means that 30 years later, we still don't know really much about cell phones in Pro, because it's so hard to change. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to say, wait, the Pro system's sitting over here, that becomes their system. As they want to change and evolve it, it's their problem, not everyone's problem. And over in this environment, the only way you're going to get the information is through web services. We're not going to let anybody go in and directly tie into those databases. So through a standard contract web service, that will allow us the flexibility to kind of change and move that system going forward. Okay, with that introduction, I'm going to give a few minutes to Steve and let him talk about some of the things that we're doing with this new solution that might be interesting that we also had a difficult time doing. Go ahead, Steve.
A little more history, because I have a little more history. The person system is about 30 years old. We had another shot at it about 15 years ago. After 15 years, we're rethinking it again. The term PRO, Person Reference Object. I am really tired of defending the practice of putting non-persons in the person table, so I'm really happy with what you've done. Of necessity, there have been non-person entities in the person table all these 30 years, because they were needed. The term reference object, I think, was given to us by Eric Dana books. Never really caught on. So as we're thinking about what do we name this new thing, we call, come up with all kinds of future things. We really just came back to what the industry calls it, the Identity and Access Management System, IAM. Yes, we tried to put a Y in front of it, because that's the cool thing to do that we like right now. And we found through experience, we just couldn't have a serious conversation about a system called GAP. So, we do use it as kind of a nickname still, but it's the BYU, Identity and Access Management System. We are going to handle non-persons better than we used to. We're going to greatly expand that. I would think that at one point, the non-persons will drop out of Pro. Actually, Pro itself may drop out of the world at some point, but I'll be long retired. There's various reasons for non-persons, and you probably know some of them. But our plan is to allow any kind of entity which may need to interact with any other kind of entity. We're going to start with devices, systems, processes. What else might be in there in the future? Locations. We've had all kinds of fun discussions. Should we put this chair in there? Well, maybe, if it's going to interact in some way with other entities. So the central table in this system is not the person anymore. It's the identity. At the time of conversion, it will certainly be the person table in actuality. But the identity will have a table behind it of some kind with the particular information related to that identity type. We have one situation where there is no such table. That would be the situation. This is one of the interesting things that we've handled, is the guest access system, where a student, let's say a missionary, delegates rights to his mom. Right now, mom has to go through our somewhat painful create NetID procedure. We hope in the future that she could just give us whatever, her Facebook or Google or whatever it is, and through Federation, she doesn't have to go through that pain. In that case, we will make a credential record for her. We'll make kind of a dummy identity ID, just because everybody has to have one. And that's it. So, you know some of the cool things that Kelly wants to do, and Phil and others are talking about in the future. That's what we see in some of these other things that will come along as these dictators. So that's the identity, just a high level New York day of the identity table. Obviously, you can have multiple credentials. We actually have multiple credentials now, even though our current Pro/CAS system is handles only NetID password. I think Dan, you're going to talk about multi-factor and federation, all that stuff. But we think that this will handle some of that stuff that's happening. Let's see. Okay. We next go to the events that are being raised in Pro. And then we're going to go to the events that are going to be raised by this IAM system. That one is in process. But the Pro events are in production. Let's see, did I send you those counts?
Yes.
Let's look at that, shall we? These are some of the counts of 1 week's activity on the event hub.
Fun.
In production. I don't know what all these are. Well, the ones that are, the entity is Pro, I know what those are.
Yeah.
They're all pro.
So there's
I started
one
with
list
Pro.
by counts. So anyway, just slowly scroll through those so you can see what are available to you as consumers. What?
I think at the top, right there, there's one child undeceased.
That's the resurrection event.
Until the resurrection, you realize that that's just correctly mistaken.
I thought it was going to be why Lazarus.
Spouse undeceased.
Same thing.
You're gonna think ahead, Steve, that's
As
good.
you can see, in just 1 week's work, it's pretty simple, so.
People report themselves dead, so we stop collecting all the time.
Yeah. They do that to the alumni.
Yeah.
They do. Yep. Okay, Just a couple of notes about this. In this first column, basically, those are the events, kind of related to tables and Pro. Just the basic address change, email change, phone change, name change, whatever. In the right column are some of the things that we've come up with. I say we, by we I mean Doug. This is what we're for more granular kinds of events that we think might be of interest. There could certainly be lots of new ones in the future. So if you go down to person ones a little bit, are those, no, look at all the codes in here too, so.
They're by here.
So if you change marital status, you'll get a person change event and maybe one of these more specific marriage events. We found a single action can raise like 5 events. So, just
I'd
a
like
couple
to
of
change
notes.
my birthday. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Specifically the birth year part of it?
Oh, yeah, whatever.
A couple of notes before I sit down. The event body, let's look up one of these person changes, I guess. This is what you'll see out of the wiki, so. Better sub, but go down to the body, the sample body. Okay. This, everything that's in the body of an event is considered public. If it's not public and you need some authorization to see it, you'll have to call that URL that's provided. Hold on a little. Go down to the URL. Okay. And we can get even more confidential. There's 2 situations where we can't even give you a URL with a person ID. Number 1 is restricted. The person's restricted, in which we basically deny their existence. We can't even put a URL by the person ID. The other one is some of the more sensitive events, such as person unmarried. We think the event itself is so sensitive that we're not even going to put your person ID on that. We've invented a thing we call the intermediary. So we send you off to a URL with nothing more than a number on it, and we call the web service for you. Other than that, you can bring up the IAM events, and I think I'm done.
Because you're saying when you put an event out there, you have to put the person ID with all that information there.
Yeah. And the public type information, you'll see in the event body, if you want more, you can call the URL, and it'll apply your authorizations. Because it's a web service, right? And then you can see more if you're authorized to see it.
Right, but on some department, there's an event that's raised and I can ask for it, I can ask that person's right on, just about that. Okay. There's a lot of discussion on that.
Based on
Can be disclosed, so,
authorizations.
okay, that's what you found. Okay.
Okay, and IAM events, it's in process, but you can go to that website and see what we're thinking of. Any questions before I hold it up to the spirit? Okay.
Everyone's up?
Did we show the Popeye thing yet?
No, I haven't.
You got the Popeye thing?
I don't have Popeye.
All you know is saying I am what I am, so it's kind of hard. Go back to the broccoli. Scroll down. So about a year and a half, 2 years ago, Kelly Flanagan introduced the concept that he wanted was event-driven architecture. And what that is, I'll explain to that. That's what this is all already done. Now, you all know the problem that we have right now with synchronizing data. Right? It takes a while to do that. It takes a day, it takes a week, it takes a month. So we're overcoming that with this event-driven architecture. And I'm going to explain a little bit here. So the events that Steve explained to you are the events that Pro is raising. For example, somebody changed their address. They raise that event, and then whoever wants to listen to that event can. Okay, so this is, the event hub is kind of like a chat room for computers only. So we're going to do a little bit example of that. Dan, can I get you to drive this next part? That computer. There's a study session.
When you have to install buddy,
So VI event.
they figured it. Sorry.
On here. What directory are you in? Go to TNP, CDTNP. In VI event. Okay, so what we have in here, this upper part up here is the authentication piece where you need to authenticate with the username, password, API key, whatever, so that we can positively identify you. But here is basically an event. And again, anybody can raise an event and anybody can receive an event. There are absolutely no restrictions on that. So an event, we have them categorized by the domain, and our domain is BYU. If BYU Hawaii wanted to get in on this, the domain would be edu.byuh, BYU Idaho. So that's the domain that we're looking at. The entity is who you are, who you're representing. So example, Pro is going to raise an event of address change, okay? And that's fine. Those who want to see the address change can see it. However, the chess club can also raise an address change also of one of their members. So you can differentiate between the two of who is throwing this event and who you want to listen to, okay? So go ahead and, Dan, go ahead and put anything you want in this event body itself. And if you're online, those are watching on the TV, and those in this room that have a computer, all this was right here on this Peach1 server. It's a PHP server. In the temp directory are all these different events. There's 20 of them there. You can go in there, poke into them, and change it. Okay. Go ahead and save that off. And you'll see over here is I am a consumer. And what I'm listening to is I'm listening to all the events from students with type of test and from this domain. And that's what that one is saying there. Okay, so go ahead and execute that. Now this is on production right here. This is not a PowerPoint. And we'll see how long that takes to switch over. Okay, so now every event is just that fast. You do not have to wait till the end of the day to synchronize something, or the end of the week, or whatever. All these events are basically happening in real time. Now there's been a lot of problems like with new hires and new fires, right? How long does that take to synchronize across to where somebody actually needs it? It takes a while. But now with all these events so that HR can raise, anybody can raise, all this information is basically instantaneous. So all of it is real time. So when you get that event, that address change, you got it right there and you can act on it right away. So there's two ways. Like I said, anybody can raise an event, anybody. Because you logged in, we positively identified you, so nobody can spoof somebody else's events. Okay, and you can, as a consumer, you can know who you want to listen to and who you can act upon. As a consumer, and anybody can see these events. Oh, thanks. See, in the old system, I had to wait till Monday to actually do that. Right? The time's long gone by then. Exactly. And so as this one, there's two methods of getting the events. One is automatically, where you define where you want this event to go to.
A webhook.
A webhook, which this is, or you can do a REST service GET and get them yourselves manually on your own timing. Okay, it's that simple and that powerful. Any questions?
What about filters?
Yes, this has filters in on this one here. So this is the event body right here, plain and simple. Now we're going to add some filters or some metadata that you can do on your side, some additional filtering on. For example, if this was student and this was test, I could say this is about a football game. So I can filter on those. Yeah, I'd like to listen to, again, further discerning which particular event. This is an EDU student test, but I can go ahead and add some metadata for my consumers to also filter on, or somebody says, well, I'm not interested in football, so I don't care about that event. So again, that's what that is for, so you can add more metadata to further describe what your event is. And again, like I said, this message body here, anything you want, absolutely anything you want to put in there. Again, for the pro stuff, if it's confidential stuff, we'll just give you the secure URL that you need to go back into to get that actual data. So I think we're staying fully in compliance with FERPA. Okay? Any other questions?
So there's documentation for the person events. Is there documentation for other ones? How do we find out what?
So on this one here, you take your camera or whatever. The second one down, Event Hub API, has comprehensive documentation on how to do all of this.
And if you go back to the list of pro events.
It's the registry of events, I think you want to.
Yeah, yeah. This is something we're asking everybody who's doing this to cooperate with. There you go, okay, back up on this screen, go back up to its
The other
parent.
The other.
The other.
The other backup.
No,
No, you were right.
What we're saying is go to its parent in the wiki. You may have to slide that over to get to that.
There we go,
Get the-
registry of events, that's what it
We have this out here, or we're asking systems, so this is listing systems that are raising events, so if you just scroll this up, and this is something we're really encouraging people to do a better job of. So here are some systems that have started actually putting things in, and I think you'll see more and more of those in there. One of the things that maybe isn't 100% plain is, if you in your system said, hey, I want to get to the point where I am part of this peer-to-peer kind of relationship so that I not only am getting the events of when information changed, but I want to raise them out of my application, great, we can go ahead and get that going. You need to talk to us so we start consuming your events and updating the central store. Okay, does that make sense? And I would hope, we tried to be pretty generic, if you use the exact same contract, for example, for address change, that everybody could consume each other's events without having to code specifically for each one. Or just some ideas.
And going along with that, we have comprehensive SDKs also. So with the C framework, 2 lines of code, and you can raise any event.
Did we include the universe of the event hub tutorial? Did you have as a page we could go to?
The university API here is second from the bottom.
It's the one right before the yellow.
We have that. You want to click on the tab for Event Hub API. You can also, it's a document that's being completed right now, but we also have one if you search for Event Hub tutorial. If you want to get started in there and learn how to use the Event Hub, it's pretty complete. We're doctoring it up right now, but there's also a web page called Event Hub tutorial, and it just steps you right through starting to raise events and how to consume them.
So again, all this is a true queue. So these are always coming to you in order. Nothing's going to be out of order. And also the other thing that part of our design was we're going to guarantee delivery of these events. Okay? So if you don't subscribe to them and you don't get them, they're going to build up in your queue. They're always going to be there. And you have to be interested in time-sensitive stuff. Like you want to throw an event, bookstore sale, okay, today at 4 o'clock, okay? That event isn't going to do you any good tomorrow, right? So again, consuming these events, you have to be, however you want to do that, come automatically or get them every 5 minutes in your code or whatever. But again, we have the SDK so that you can plug this directly into your code to raise any event. But again, keep in mind with your event, what are you going to put in the message body? Is it confidential? Let's see. Any other questions?
Can Alex talk now?
Again, this is in production right now. So we're getting real-time events and we can do real-time synchronization right now. But the key is you got to add those 2 or 3 lines of code to actually do it.
One more question.
Yes.
So if my application is not running at the time an event comes through, if I'm subscribed to these types of events, do you queue them for me, or is it my responsibility to go find out?
Okay, so are you raising an event or consuming?
Consuming.
You're consuming it? Okay, so if your application isn't running, Whenever it does run, it's gonna connect up to the event hub and get all your events in order
That are in the
at the
queue.
time that you,
So do I acknowledge
Come
events as
online.
I receive them,
Yes.
so you know what to tell me?
there, you do acknowledge them, and that's part of the SDK, you can acknowledge them. And once they are acknowledged, they go away completely. The other thing is if you're raising an event and nobody is listening to that event, it doesn't go in the event hub at all. Okay? So if you're raising 1,000 events and nobody is consuming them or listening to them, they do not, there's no queues for them to go into, so they're out of the system.
One thing, we did put a special one in there. It'll go into an archive.
Yes,
So,
again,
you could go out and see, yep, it is being raised and
Yeah.
it's making it to the archive.
so again, we can test it, and this is for our testing to see how this is working out. But again, basically, if nobody is listening to your events,
Take it personal.
is there another, Stan?
Well, in the impossible situation that the event hub is not up and I try to send an event, is it my responsibility then to send it once I notice that the event hub really is? not?
Okay, again, what we're trying to, what we're guaranteeing is delivery. So we have this on a cluster, and we have utilities to make sure it's always up and running.
And if it isn't down, it's up to you to decide how important that is.
Okay, so for instance, I have an automatic consumer to get that. If this went down, okay, what we have in the event hub is every 5 minutes, it's gonna try again to send it. So I can bring this down right now, again, it'll stay in my queue. But when I bring it up in 5, 10, an hour later, every 5 minutes, the event hub is gonna try to send that event to me. So that's how I can guarantee delivery in this scenario. But the other scenario is where you're doing a manual get yourself. Whenever you come in to get it, that's when you'll get it.
If anyone wants to stay late, we got a couple more things we gotta cover, so let's move
Okay,
on. Thanks.
so we're moving on. Who's up?
Alex.
Alex.
So if anyone doesn't know who I am, I worked for Phil for a long time, and then like he got me so stoked about identity that I ended up here. So for a little bit, we'll talk about like federated identity and why. And like thesis statement is that it's totally awesome, and we're gonna prove that right now. So you can go ahead and look at that. So you gotta have some simple, like basic definitions, like federation in a typical sense is some unions that form together and have some internal autonomy. Basically, people that decide to work together for a common purpose. And then identity is like who you are, right? And so in terms of federated identity, it's groups of organizations that come together to make it easier to share identity and identity information. And if you go look at identity federations on Wikipedia, you'll see like a whole big old list. And the one that is specific to us is in common. You'll see that Brigham University is chilling right there. And there's a lot of people that are part of this federation, but it's not the only one. There's lots of federations. Anyway, so there's two main types of federation that we deal with and that people are using involved in. So first type is where people want to use us as an identity provider. So in other words, they want to have our authentication provided to their applications. So a use case, a typical scenario for this is like Zimride is like the only one kind of right now. There's a lot of other people that are seeing they're waiting to have it happen. So, for example, when you go to Zimride and log in, you'll get redirected to CAS, and CAS will bring you back to Zimride. Everything will be happening. These two are both on these diagrams are both up on the wiki. And the one that we're talking about now is on the left. And so in this case, in the blue box, in SP or service provider for like Zimride or someone else, they would say, hey, like, they want to log in with UIU's credentials, and then they come to BYU, that nice hexagon, and we authenticate them and pull some attributes out about them, and then like give it back to them, right? I don't. I have my finger, but
Yes.
anyway. So, and then the other use case which we're currently developing is
Sorry.
is no case at all. Sorry, top button. So, again, like Zimri would be like, hey, they want to authenticate, BYU would be like, hey, sweet, like, we'll talk to Cass, and we'll go back, and we'll give the authentication information, and maybe some optional attributes to Zimri. The other one that we're developing right now is, okay, we want to delegate authentication to someone else, so we want to federate to an external entity the other way around. And the one we're working with right now is the LDS Church. So in this case, like, you know, Joe Schmo would come to try and access some CAS protected resource, or CPR, and then they'd get redirected to CAS as normal, so you wouldn't have to change anything. And then CAS, they have a little option to say, hey, I actually want to log in with the LDS Church. We say sweet, and then we forward that to a piece that talks a certain security protocol for us, so we assure that these things are trusted and whatnot. And that would get forwarded to the church, and then they'd authenticate with the church, and the church would say, hey, they authenticated, sweet, and then we'd be like, okay, awesome, and CAS would get that, and be like, okay, awesome, and then we get to the CAS protected resource, and everything would be awesome, and we'd have their identity information. So, you know what I'm saying.
So is sweet and awesome part of the protocol?
Yes, my protocol. So that's all fine and dandy, but will it blends? Like, so like, we often talk about stuff and then like, but we want demos, right? So it's demo time. So you can go ahead and, I don't know if you just want to go to Zenride and log in, and then, yeah. Okay, so when you click the login button, that's what's happening is on that left-hand diagram. So they get redirected to CAS. CAS says awesome.
You saw that.
One of those. And then that was really slow, but you get redirected back here, and that's how that happens. Is that security protocol gives them back these attributes, and BYU tells them, right, hey, they authenticated, you can trust us. The other one, so if you want to go to CAS Dev now. So, hold up. There's this sweet login link that says login via LDS account. And so if they click on that, now we're talking about the other case. That'll take them to the LDS account login screen. And then you go ahead and sign in.
See whether I remember
Oh.
the password.
Don't you love typing in front of 100 people?
It's like, which password did I just change?
Okay, so it dies, and this is the appropriate point to go to the Dilbert comic. So, you know, that's where I'm saying, oh, if this was all finished, you would look like this, and you'd want all this action. But anyway, so if we go back to that screen, though, actually, go back to the presentation. So that's the end of this demo. But if we go back to the presentation, to that fourth slide, and that diagram on the right here, what happened there, though, is if I go show you the logs, is that the church actually sent us authentication information, and it got to this point. The part that we're working on is, okay, what does that mean then to send it to CAS and to send it to the CAS protected resource? But the church actually sent that to our piece that sits here. And so that's what we're working on in Federation space. It's a bunch of fun.
So, did you have to have some kind of equivalency on this side saying if they authenticate with this credential, this kind of level of authorization like that?
And Dan is going to talk about that. So.
Nice segue, thanks.
Thanks, Alex. So we got a lot of fun things coming down the road here. Just got to try out as we work on our labs. Here's some of the.
Nice one.
There it is. So here's some other companies or would like to federate, or would possibilities for us to federate that. We've got Zimride, Domo, Calibra, BYU's library, look at the others. Right now, we're working on this federation as allowing LDS Church to federate, but we could also do Google, maybe Facebook, or other providers. And I put this down here that CAS in itself is actually a federated identity, where applications go to CAS and say, you authenticate who they are, and then come back and tell me. So each application doesn't have to take in everybody's user ID and passwords and validate it themselves. Another fun buzzword is this multi-factor authentication. There's been some issues here at BYU where people have been spoofed through phishing schemes and whatnot to give up their user ID and password credentials. Using multi-factor authentication allows another piece in there to prevent somebody else that may have your password from logging into the system. There's
Be two of those, not two of the same, not a longer password, right?
right, and so there's mainly three types of factors. We've got what you know, like your passwords and numbers. What you have could be a phone or ID card, and what you aren't. So we hear about a lot of these new payment systems and such that are using fingerprint scans on iPhones, or that's all a way to have a second factor. So two factors might be these two or those two. It just depends on the application. There's also the strong authentication, which typically means I provided some other piece of information that I know. It could be what hospital I was born in, what my birthday was, besides a password. And you'll hear that used. And in banking, it often does need two-factor authentication where I've had to have some other device or authentication factor. But it's a little ambiguous when you hear strong authentication. Go ahead.
I did.
So here's some reasons for implementing two-factor authentication, mainly security, reducing phishing schemes and other ways that people could assume your identity. And I think there's also a higher level of confidence in the system when you can provide that type of extra authentication. Here's some possible second factor options from BYU. We have a lab that we're going to try some of these out, see what works. One drawback of second factor authentication is sometimes it's a nuisance. If you had to receive a text on your phone every time you wanted to log in, that might be a bit much.
But I like that. The other day I got a text from Google. Somebody tried to get into my account. It was
I
nice.
guess it wasn't you then. Huh?
It wasn't me.
And that's another thing that we're looking at too, is how can we notify the users about their accounts? So I changed my password, or if somebody else changes my password, I want to get a notification, and that can help me know if my account's been compromised.
That does happen.
And we do send those out when you change your NetID password.
It almost.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things we're working on to try and make it more reliable. Let's see. Now with other types of authentication, like Facebook or LDS Church, it brings up the point of adaptive authentication. So some applications might be just fine using some type of social media login, okay? But then here maybe, a parent could log in and pay students tuition just using a Google account or a Facebook account, as their credential to get into the system. Maybe they couldn't register for classes for that student with that type of credential. So this brings about the adaptive. How does an application, see how that user's been authenticated? And maybe they'll say, hey, I need a higher authentication level. these authentication levels. It makes it a little more complicated, but it makes the system more flexible too. We're also looking at implementing more open standards. CAS protocols, pretty specific to CAS, so that might be one thing that changes here not real soon. Also, there's API keys, could be, replaced with OAuth, OpenID Connect. There's some authentication or authorization type standards that are out there that are being used more widely. And we're also looking at WSO2 and some of the features that it can bring us. Any questions? All right.
I have to leave 5 minutes for Belinda because she's going to give you some instructions on how you can start using stuff now and what you can start expecting in the future. So I have the rubber part of the thing, and I'm going to take 5 minutes and talk about one other thing you have to be aware of. Authorization. You'll be seeing changes. We're working pretty hard on identity and authentication, but the access management part of our team authorization is some things that you'll start hearing more and more about. We had a really great seminar yesterday. Here's the essence of the seminar. And I put a diagram here on the board. I don't have a diagram. We will be moving towards the day when authorization can be abstracted from business applications. If you want to go to a little bit of reading and understanding, we're really interested in moving to attribute-based access control. The industry for a long time was kind of on role-based access control. We feel like going to attribute-based access control has some really, really neat characteristics. If you want to read about that, that'd be great. I don't know if we have time to go into depth on all that. One of the things that we're saying is we'll abstract that out so we can have multiple enforcement points in the stack, maybe when the web service comes in. The application itself could call the decision point and say, here's the identity of a person. Are they allowed to do this function, yes or no? And we can abstract that back out of our applications and put them in places that make sense. There's 2 reasons for that, but I want you to think about that. So let's suppose I'm down here in some service. I don't know what it is, and I have to know if this person is a full-time employee that works in this department and makes more than X amount of dollars in order to be able to do this function, okay? Well, my choice right now is I write into this service to go answer that question, but I don't really want to let that service have access to salaries. Okay, so I'm not going to give them complete access to the database. By abstracting it out and the service making a call into an independent area, great. Way to go, Belinda, she has the diagram already for me. In an independent area, we can say the decision point does have the authorizations to go get those attributes. One of the ways we've got around it right now is we said, well, we won't go straight to the attributes. We'll condense things into groups like, well, he's a student or he's an employee, so that you're not getting access to the real databases uncontrolled, but that puts latency into it and creates problems. So if we extract out the code and say the decision point is the only guy who can go down to get all of these attributes in all the different systems, we don't have a security problem. Then anything up here can ask, can I do this function? And it can go to whatever direct attributes are needed. We don't have the latency, we don't have the proliferation of groups, 10,000 groups to try and handle all the situations. I was really excited. I believe there's another part of this diagram, which is the policy administration point up here. I'll use the diagram up here. Policy administration point, where we will start to write our policies in a language that our users can understand. In order to do this function, you've got to have this attribute be equal to this attribute be equal to that, and they can start handling it instead of it being written in C code, which is almost where authorization happens now. You have 5 minutes, Belinda. If there's any more questions on that, we'd love to talk about it, but there will be more information coming out on
I'm just
authorization.
wondering what your timeline is for a framework like this.
I believe that you will see things functioning next year in production, hopefully even a little quicker. We're kind of trying to move it so you can see a few things that you can start with that. Okay?
Okay, so the high-level roadmap in terms of what we've been doing, we had an ITD project last year, another one this year. investigation, and now implementing some of those things. We did a pro analysis, and Steve shared some of the information that we've done with that. The identity bus being the raising pro identities or events, and then the IAM, the new identities being consuming those. Basically, we're working to get that a complete bi-directional synchronization. Meanwhile, we're basically going into production this month with both CAS upgrade and Shibboleth upgrade. And Alex and Dan have worked a lot in getting up to speed on those applications with the change in resources and getting tests, and Jared Lau has been, and the platform team have been great to collaboration, and so that we can do more frequent updates and have a lower risk in doing that. The project that the LDS Church Federation would kind of fit into this CAS Shibboleth proof of concept. We're using that to see, can we use CAS and Shibboleth, the existing outsource or open source projects, to do multi-factor, to do some of these other advanced authentication options. So we're just getting started with that. And then we also have planned and approved an analysis of Grouper, which is another open source system that potentially could replace Grow, and then attribute-based authorization, as Doug just described. And of course, out of each of these, there ends up, a lot of other things being spawned off. So HR, we have that bi-directional sync with the events. Starting in June is when that's scheduled for. Basically, as many projects so if you have a system right now or this year that you want to start doing this, let's start the conversations now. As we get things in the authentication, we'll start rolling those out as they get created. And the authorization pieces are further down the road.
Any questions? Fantastic. Thank you.
So we're also going to stick around for do a one-on-one with the concepts that you're talking about.
Will everybody please make sure you sign the roll at the front of the room?
And grab some goodies on your way out, too.